Probably the worst epidemic rural America has ever had. And if they don't do something about it, it will get worse.
If it isn't called a scourge, I don't know what it would be called.
It's one of the most evil drugs that I've ever dealt with. I think anybody will ever deal with.
Nobody signs up when they first try meth to be a meth addict. Nobody envisions that that will ever happen to them.
We could see it coming across the country from California and Arizona and the Southwest, and it gradually worked its way across the country, and we knew that it was coming. It was just inevitable that it was going to show up here.
It is being called America's new epidemic, the devil on earth, a scourge on society. The offender is a drug called methamphetamine. It is destroying the lives of men, women, and children in communities across the nation. Communities just like ours.
We used to hear a lot about meth, but really it didn't become a reality until we had that meth lab that was set up in an empty grocery store almost on Main Street. And then it took everyone's attention, and we decided that we do have a problem, we need to do something about this.
Methamphetamine has many effects within a community, some more dramatic than others.
911, what is your emergency? Well, that's a bit, it was a head-on collision on Highway 28, heading east out of Morris. Okay,
it was on May 1st. I had received a phone call. It was around 11 or maybe a little bit after, saying that my mom had been in an accident.
I got in a car accident over in Morris, Minnesota, causing death of Ellen Anderson.
We went and we met with Trooper Natalie Hansen, and she had told us that indeed the kid that had killed Mom had been on meth.
A victim that didn't need to happen, you know, just because of my choices, deciding to continue to drive when I knew that I shouldn't.
It was horrible. I mean, you're not ready. You think you're a strong individual, and they had to take her out with the jaws of life. There was no driver's side.
It all stems from me once again, you know, and I could have prevented it, and I could have just, you know, done what was right, and I just decided not to, really. I don't know.
I miss her voice. I miss her telling me that she loves me. That's what I miss. I was there when he was arraigned, and I just stared at him. He was on his side of the courtroom, I was in the front row on the other, and I just stared at him. I just couldn't believe, how could this kid do this? You know, are you feeling remorse? Do you feel bad?
They didn't deserve to be the victims, you know, of such a crime that, you know, who would even think it would happen to someone like that? And, you know, it is true sympathy and remorse, and it's just, I don't know, it seems so overshadowed by what I did afterwards now.
Its initial attraction of euphoria, renewed energy, empowerment, enhanced concentration, the ability to stay awake for long periods of time, relative low cost, and the possibility of weight loss has caused untold numbers of people of all ages to experiment with this most powerful drug.
It empowers you. It makes you feel invincible. You feel no pain. You feel like you're on top of the world.
This methamphetamine is just, I don't understand it. It's like crack. Once you start, it's like, yeah, I'm up. I can do this. I got this done.
When I'd used it, I knew as a substitute for all of the other drugs that I had used before, this was by far the best thing that happened since, you know, ever, really.
At first, it was probably the most enjoyable thing that I had ever encountered. I loved it with everything, you know, and at the time I even loved it more than my family.
Methamphetamine, or meth for short, was originally developed as a stimulant in the early 1900s to treat fatigue and narcolepsy. It was later used during World War II to help soldiers stay alert and to energize factory workers. In the 60s and 70s, meth was popular with biker gangs. However, today's methamphetamine is a new drug with an old name. Over time, Methamphetamine's purity has increased dramatically. It has morphed into a more powerful and dangerous drug. And because it induces such strong feelings of euphoria, it is highly addictive. Whether manufactured locally or trafficked in from superlabs throughout the southwest United States or Mexico, methamphetamine is typically found in a powdered or crystalline form. This is where the name crystal meth comes from. Stevens County Deputy Sheriff Jason Dingman provides us with a look at meth.
The thing with methamphetamine that separates it from other drugs is that methamphetamine will work any way that you can get it into your system. It can be smoked, snorted, injected, sprinkled in your coffee, poured in a bottle of Mountain Dew. Any way you can get methamphetamine in your bloodstream, you will achieve that high. This 1/4 gram will get someone high probably up to 5 or 6 times depending on how they use it. This right here is enough to get somebody hooked on methamphetamine for the rest of their lives unless they do something about it. A gram quantity of meth would cost anywhere between $75 and $200 depending on who's buying it and who's selling it. It's a lucrative business for these dealers, and it pays for them to drive across the country to pick up a couple of pounds of methamphetamine and bring that back here and divide that up into gram quantities, and they're making 10 times the amount of money that they invested into that couple of pounds. An ounce of methamphetamine, I like to describe it as about the size of a ping pong ball, is about an ounce. And that'll go for anywhere between $1,500 and $2,500 to $3,000 for an ounce of methamphetamine.
Now that we have explored the costs and methods of use, the question then becomes, who is the typical meth user?
Typically, I was seeing the maybe 17 to 22-year-old, and all of a sudden now we're seeing people married with careers and in their 40s and even 50s. I just think it crosses all economic barriers and age groups and gender, race.
The methamphetamine user ranges from the housewife who's just taking care of the kids at home to the business executive and everything in between.
Methamphetamine is an equal opportunity drug. I've had young people, I've had people in their 50s and 60s, I've had professional people, I've had unemployed people. There is no typical profile.
Anybody on the street. When I first came up to treatment this time, they thought I was a staff member or just a visitor, because meth users, any drug users, are all shapes and sizes.
And the thing that I've noticed, and it's really quite palpable recently, is the young families, mother and father, using methamphetamine. They'll have little kids in the house, and there are a number of risks there.
We have treated people in their 50s, 40s, large numbers in their 30s, and so it's hitting all age groups.
Meth use seems to cross all boundaries of race, gender, age, and socioeconomic status. Why is this drug so attractive to such a wide variety of people?
People often ask when they see the before and after pictures of meth addicts, why would you ever take it? And the fact of the matter is that people take drugs, including meth, to feel good or to feel better. People also take meth to get more done, to have more energy, and to lose weight. And that's why the appeal of methamphetamine really extends beyond just people who are otherwise people looking to get high or drug abusers. It really applies to our culture as a whole.
They say it's the best high they've ever had. They tell me that they were addicted after the first time, and that's all they want. That's all they crave. I've had clients stay sober as long as 3 years, fighting this addiction, only to fall off the wagon and throw it all away again. Once you are in recovery from methamphetamines, it's a lifelong battle because the drug is just that powerful.
Kids, I don't think, realize what it does to them or how quickly it can do it to them. And as adults, when we tell them that, they don't listen. And what happens is peers tell them, yeah, don't worry about that. I've been using it for nothing wrong with me. I only, I can quit anytime I want, and don't believe all those things that you're being told. And I think one of the problems with that is not only did they believe that, but I think a lot of adults believe that too. Sort of like the old idea of crying wolf too often, you better not ever have a drink, and then people have one, and then two, and then they've been drinking for a year and 5 years, and then after 10 years they quit. So when people say, you better not drink, they think, yeah, that's all a bunch of crap. Well, with meth, it's totally different. The rules are different.
Well, I think one of the things that makes it somewhat different is the impact that it does have on the brain. What we're becoming aware of with methamphetamine and is that the chemical will really produce a large inflow of dopamine, brain chemical. So there is a more extensive brain damage that kind of happens with the methamphetamine user, which slows down the treatment process. The psychosis, and actually the psychosis that develops with the methamphetamine can even last for months or years once the individual ceases the usage.
Because of the nature of the drug, addiction can happen quickly.
So one night on a gravel road on the way back from one of the houses, I tried it and was hooked on it ever since. All it took was one time.
I really didn't know I was getting addicted. I started off by snorting it or smoking it, and I was completely oblivious to the idea that I was getting addicted or even could. At the point I was still thinking that it's not going to happen to me. I can use once in a while, not a big deal, and that didn't happen.
Kids, are not seeing that as a long-term impact, and will at times, say, well, it's not going to impact me that way, and they start to experiment with it. And unfortunately, once they experiment, they can become addicted very, very quickly.
I can honestly say I crave it every day. It's something that will be with me probably for the rest of my life. But I don't want to do it, that's one thing, but the craving is there.
I was just having a conversation with one of our counselors yesterday who had used a DVD for his group. And in this video, they do a display or a sample of the drug itself. When that was shown on the video, the clients were just fixated on that. They were just gawking, almost drooling with the visual stimuli of the drug being shown. And that's something that's very difficult to counteract.
It's such an addictive drug. And people relapse for different reasons. I was clean for 4.5 years. I moved out of the town I was living in. I got back together with my old friends. All I had to do was see it. Somebody held up a baggie with it in it. All I had to do was see it, and I was using it again. That's all it took.
While no one disputes the extreme addictive nature of methamphetamine, professionals caution us about the message of instant addiction.
With every new drug, people tend to say, this is the most addictive drug ever. This stuff is instantly addicting. And the fact of the matter is that no drug is instantly addicting. Addiction is a process that happens. It's not a one-time event. Although people who become addicted to certain drugs say things like they knew the minute they used it, they just wanted to use it again and again, or the first time I used it, it was really different for me. That does not addiction make. Those are more statements of their subjective judgment about how they felt the first time they experienced this. So to say that something is instantly addictive, I think, risks destroying credibility about all your messages. Many more people use drugs than become addicted to them, and if you characterize something as instantly addictive, people will know people who tried it and didn't become addicted, and you've lost your credibility. So we need to be very careful how we characterize it.
It is such an addictive chemical. Generally, we used to say that to someone addicted to alcohol, it's probably about 10 years before you start to see the difficulties within the family or the job or those types of things. Methamphetamine is much quicker.
It was the meth labs that first grabbed the public's attention. Methamphetamine is manufactured or cooked in highly explosive clandestine labs using common chemicals like over-the-counter decongestants and the farm chemical anhydrous ammonia. It can be, and is, cooked almost anywhere. What makes rural Minnesota more susceptible to the production and use of meth was the availability of the chemicals and the greater chance of operating undetected.
That's one aspect of meth that really got the public's attention, I think, is the manufacturing of it, because people were amazed that you could make methamphetamine from common household products that most of us have in our garages right now.
We were very concerned about the effects that meth labs had on people who might come upon them, whether it was folks cleaning ditches who found the discarded chemicals and apparatus, whether it was children who were living in or near a meth house, or the people themselves making meth when there'd be an explosion or a fire or some other danger.
We've all heard enough now that meth labs are extremely dangerous. They can explode, fire hazards. There's upwards of 5 to 7 pounds of toxic waste produced for every pound of methamphetamine that's produced in a meth lab.
I saw a headline in the paper that said that meth labs are on the decrease, and I was hoping that people wouldn't think that meth was any less of a problem. It's just that the problem is shifting. What we see now, I think, is more people getting meth in from other places, maybe better, purer meth, and so the issue isn't quite so much the manufacture of it, it's the use of it.
The number of meth labs that are being seized statewide has really dramatically decreased. And I think there's several reasons for that. Some of it is due to some recent legislation that has passed, making it more difficult to obtain the Sudafed tablets or the ephedrine tablets, and that's one thing that is needed in the manufacturing process is ephedrine. If you don't have ephedrine, you can't make methamphetamine.
We made the point of sale restrictions much more stringent and passed with overwhelming support. So it was a very impressive bill, probably the most aggressive and comprehensive bill in the nation to date.
At the legislative level, and the governor really pushed this issue this past year to restrict the sale of Sudafed, the ingredients for meth, to behind the counter by a pharmacist or a pharmacist assistant. The restriction of the sale is to 1 package at a time, no more than 2 packages a month, and a log will be kept of those people when they're buying it, which is a deterrent, a huge deterrent for people buying that product for an illegal use.
Another important piece in the bill is the contamination and cleanup guidelines that many, probably over 75% of the counties, have adopted in their ordinances. So the Department of Health has a very clear guideline approach to cleaning up your contaminated property. In the bill, there's also $1.5 million for the biennium for treatment grants to counties that prove a best practices approach for treatment. And we also have $1 million per year for 10 new BCA agents that will deal with directly and only methamphetamine issues.
Although recent legislation has resulted in a decrease in rural meth labs, law enforcement officials in Minnesota say they have not seen a dramatic decrease in meth use.
Anybody you talk to in prosecution or police work in rural Minnesota will tell you that methamphetamine is our #1 problem that we face right now.
I think the public at large were somewhat resistant to it because they thought, oh my gosh, this cannot possibly be happening in the rural communities, that this is a big city drug, and certainly it wouldn't be happening in rural, the greater Minnesota.
One major concern is the implication for law enforcement. Officers in rural Minnesota say they've seen a dramatic increase in meth use. Since 1989, Minnesota's prison population has grown by 189%. This is due in large part to the dramatic increase in the number of drug offenders. The Minnesota Department of Corrections notes that 39% of the state's inmate growth in the last 5 years can be attributed to methamphetamine offenders. Officers tell us that meth use and crime appear to go hand in hand. This includes burglaries, thefts, and even murder. As a result, police are spending more time with meth problems and less time with other criminal justice issues. This means fewer officers for prevention programs, fewer officers for traffic enforcement, safety and security, even investigations.
It really started hitting here, I would say, probably 5 or 6 years ago is when we started actually arresting people for it locally in the community here.
Meth is one of those drugs that has surfaced in the schools in probably the last 2 to 3 years.
Probably 99 or 2000, I started first with a trickle, then with a stream, then with a bit more of a torrent of cases. And since 2002, they've been fairly steady.
I've been in this office now 10 years, and when I first got here, I can tell you that less than 1% of my caseload was any relation to methamphetamines that I was aware of. In the last 3 to 5 years, that has significantly changed. I currently have 131 clients. Of those 131, a third of them, 33% of them, are methamphetamine directly related. We can't even count the number of indirect offenses at this time, the burglaries and the thefts. In addition, the other full-time agent who has current caseload of 98 clients, 50% of her clients are currently on for direct methamphetamine use, which is just unheard of.
Per capita, it's worse in rural America than it is in urban America. So meth is a bigger problem per capita here than it is there. So I would say that it's definitely in epidemic proportions here.
We served 8 counties when I was on the C6 Drug Task Force, and it was amazing because I would go to work. Our office was based in Wilmer. I would go to work, and some of the other agents would have search warrants ready to go. And we wouldn't even have to ask what it was for. It was always methamphetamine.
We've seen a steady increase in our workload in meth cases and meth-related cases. You can talk about cases where the person is actually busted with the drug or manufacturing the drug or selling the drug. And certainly, that's what people tend to think about. But there are a number of other kinds of cases that I regard as meth cases because they're meth-involved cases.
I would say the attention on the medical practice has been really in the last 5 years that we recognize that as part of something that we have to deal with.
And I think the DEA has indicated that. Minnesota right now ranks in the top 10 in the nation in illicit drug use between the ages of 13 and 17, and that's an unacceptable number for Minnesota.
As here in North Dakota and northwestern Minnesota, the time that we're getting in federal court with convictions, for everyone we take off, there always seems to be someone else willing to take their place because the profits are so high.
In addition to the drain on law enforcement, the effect that methamphetamine abuse can have on families is staggering.
The effect on juvenile cases has been probably the most dramatic thing that we've had in quite a long time. A number of neglect cases where the parents have methamphetamine problems and the children have to be taken out of the home.
My mom, she's really young, and she just didn't want to stop partying. And my sister and I would watch our brothers almost every other weekend that we'd visit her because we lived with our dad. And she'd be using or drinking throughout my whole life.
That's really the sad thing. These kids living in these homes when they're making meth with all the dangerous chemicals. I mean, these kids don't have a chance.
They told us a story about a bus that they had just had in a very nice little community in my district where 4 little children were in a home where they were making meth and obviously neglected, abused, and they had been taking baths in the bathtub where there was meth toxic residue being dumped down. And not only in this house was these 4 little children that were neglected, was a mother that was 8.5 months pregnant, admitted to taking meth while she was pregnant.
We ended up living in a condemned house in the basement, hiding from the landlord, keeping our kids warm with blankets or, barely being able to feed them.
I almost lost custody of my son, this time getting in trouble because I relapsed. I probably will lose custody of him and possibly my daughter.
They came straight out there and got my kids, and I lost them for 2 years. I decided that I wasn't ready to quit dope. So yeah, for 2 years I ran around doing dope, maybe seeing my kids about once a month. And even when they did come, I made myself believe that it was okay to to banish them to the corner while I hide in the bathroom and do my dope. You know, I thought I was being a good dad, but looking back on it, I was an absolutely terrible dad. You know, I destroyed their lives. They didn't know who I was for 2 years, and it really affected them pretty bad.
What will the children think if they perceive that their parents are using drugs? And we as parents all come to learn that what we think the kids don't know, usually they do know.
But I know it's devastating for both of them because they were I was their mother and their father for both of them since they were born. And then all of a sudden, I'm not there anymore. So, I mean, they cry at night and things now, but I'm scared to know what's going to happen in the future, honestly, because I won't know until it happens, how it affects them.
Violence is also an issue for children and families involved in meth abuse situations. The meth user may not be aware of their actions while high and may be more likely to react strongly or without thinking.
Paranoia breeds the violence. If they feel like they're cornered or trapped, that's when they're going to become violent.
Their whole thought process is different, and they're more apt to get in a vehicle and drive. They're more apt to engage in risky behaviors that they wouldn't normally do if they were not under the influence of methamphetamines.
Committed robberies. You know, I did anything to get money. You know, it didn't matter what it was.
Methamphetamine is a very powerful stimulant. It makes people jittery, nervous, jumpy, and actually to the point of paranoia.
I remember specifically one time I was living with some other people and I'd just freshly gotten high. And I came home, there's nobody there. So I locked the door, sat down, went to shoot up, and I just got done, put all my stuff away, and I heard boom, boom, boom at the door. So I got scared. You know, there's a little apartment, here's a living room, and there's some steps. I ran up the steps and hid at the top, watching down, and I seen the door get kicked in and seen a bunch of cops rushing in the door. So I said, okay, I'm gonna fight or go to jail. If I'm going to jail, I'm not going without a fight. So I jumped down the stairs, tried to kick one through the wall, ended up getting out the back door, and I ran around the block, seen that my car was gone, so I figured, oh, I'm gonna get you. So I called the cops and reported my car stolen, and then 2 weeks later, I came back to the house. No cops had ever been there. There was a hole in the wall, so I must have actually jumped down the stairs. I didn't even have a car, but there really was a police report made that my car was stolen. And I completely believe that every bit of it happened.
I've hid on a fish boat. I've hid in barns. I've gotten out, ran out in the middle of a field, hid my dope when I think the cops are watching me. Now, if they're watching me, wouldn't they see that? You know, that's how screwed up in the mentality in your head gets because you've been up so long, the drug's just affecting you like that. You're wore out.
In addition to the human cost, the economic costs of meth are significant for Minnesota communities.
It costs an incredible amount of money, and it's expensive to the property taxpayer because the state only does so much. The cost of meth across the county for all these functional areas can add up to 1, 2, 3, or 4, sometimes even 5 or 6% of their entire levy. And when you start adding up those dollars, that's just enormous.
The cost of building new prisons is astronomical. And the cost of care for these methamphetamine addicts in prison is astronomical.
We had one female in our jail that cost us over $50,000 in medical bills. We had one other gentleman that the dental work was 30-some thousand just in, you know, taking teeth out. So yeah, it's a major thing. Our budget right now for this year alone is already close to $200,000 over budget because of medical costs due to meth.
The environmental costs, how do you secure a lab site? Who does that work and who pays for it? Typically it's the county. Who prevents people from going into the site, securing the building and so forth, and then who pays to remediate the building, the county. It's just had a pervasive impact on all functional areas of county government.
I felt very strongly about collecting our data to present to our citizens on how that impacts their pocketbook. And so we did a point-in-time study 6 months into 2004, and found that the costs projected for 2004, just county costs, included the sheriff, the county attorney's office, social services, health, corrections, and so forth. Our costs were $1.8 million in 2004. An important thing to note about those kinds of dollars is those are property tax dollars. They're not dollars that are really coming from an income tax or something of that nature. These are local county dollars that are being used for methamphetamine instead of some other aspects that we should be using it for.
While we look to the criminal justice system for help, we cannot stop there. The message is clear. If we are to succeed in the long run, effective intervention and treatment must be an integral part of the equation.
There are three components critical to recovery from addiction long term. There's detox, stopping the drug, rehabilitation, learning how to deal with life without the drug, and there's aftercare, which is supported living that really rewards recovery and sober activities. We need to provide the whole continuum in terms of detox, rehabilitation, and aftercare.
There is a money issue. You know, it's an expensive process to go through a treatment process. But we're also aware that treatment and recovery works. There's been a number of studies that indicate for every dollar spent on treatment, society saves $7. Now that's over a longer period of time. Insurance companies aren't going to realize that profit immediately with it, so if they spend $1, they're not necessarily going to save $7 immediately with it.
The other big myth about methamphetamine that I hear, which is the same thing that people said about crack cocaine, is that this drug is so powerful that no treatment works. That is simply not the case. There is effective treatment for methamphetamine addiction.
Right now, there are several things that seem to work better. There's been a national test of a treatment process that they call Matrix, and that seems to work both either on an inpatient or an outpatient basis, given an appropriate length of time that the individuals are able to work with the person. Also, cognitive behavioral therapy, is another treatment process that seems to have some success in working with the methamphetamine addict.
Outpatient treatment certainly can be effective, but it depends on where the person is in terms of the chronicity with their addiction. Most of the people that we're seeing in inpatient treatment don't have the structure and stability in their lives to really maintain abstinence and function well enough to benefit from outpatient treatment.
This year and through this last year, we were working with a lot of different groups to figure out what's the best approach towards treatment. And there's many that we can utilize, but we have to have models where we are assured there will be a success in the final end. And a success is an addict who can be rejoined back with their family and their children, and they stay off the drug and become self-serving and self-sustaining citizens of the community again.
How long will it take to treat these meth addicts? Methamphetamine can remain in a person's system for days and can take 6 weeks or longer to detoxify. Also, many people are on a binge when they enter treatment and typically crash during their detox period. This cuts into the standard time set up for most treatment programs.
The most frequent question I get asked about treatment is, how long do meth addicts need treatment? Well, the answer is it depends. The duration of treatment is driven by the severity of the illness.
If the state imposes longer treatments on insurance companies to pay for meth addiction or drug addiction in general, but meth addiction specifically, that does cost in everybody's pocketbooks because it's recovered through our premiums that we pay on health insurance. The flip side of that is a lot of reports are coming out and saying 30 days is not enough with a meth addiction.
The unfortunate thing is methamphetamine seems to take a longer period of time to actually recover from. And there seems to be more or a higher percentage of recidivists, the individual that goes back to using.
While progress is being made in the area of treatment for methamphetamine users, there is still concern regarding the recidivism rate. The same concerns are experienced by the judicial system as they seek creative alternatives to incarceration.
We're at the point now that you can't just lock people up and throw away the key, because they are going to get out at some point in time, and if you don't deal with their problems, they're going to still have them when they leave. You try to find creative solutions. Maybe you try to stay prison sentences. Well, every judge I know has been burned on a stayed sentence where they've tried to send the person to treatment rather than prison, and the person fails.
And I got sentenced to teen challenge, and I ended up absconding from there, taking off, just not even thinking about it really. And once again, I violated that, and in January of '05 this year, I ended up getting a high-speed chase down in Wilmer and found some more methamphetamines.
You feel re-victimized again. It's just, it opens the wounds that you were trying to heal.
It's the persistent depression that follows coming off of methamphetamine that makes it real difficult for them to stay off their drug.
Well, after I stopped using meth, I became depressed because, you know, the withdrawals. I just stuck to myself, just stayed by myself and stuck with my fiance.
The other thing that they say is if they return to their home community, they generally return to their same peers, the same situations that drew them into using meth in the first place. And so many of them are looking at relocation, changing careers, starting all over someplace else because they can't make the shift in staying away from the people that they used to use with.
I think about it right now, I'm like, man, you know, I got 30 days left. What am I going to do? I've been calling some people that have looked out for me before. I mean, not as for drugs or anything. I mean, I actually have a couple friends out there that, one used to do it, she doesn't do it anymore. She's been begging me to come up to Fargo. Come up here, live up here, I can get you a job, you know, and if I can get the first step by not sitting around once I get out of here, out of prison, and start working, you know, I might dibble and dabble in it, I might not.
Recovery does work. It's not going to work on everyone. We're aware of that. We're not, you know, able to fix everyone up 100%, but we know that if they continue to use that chemical, they're going to deteriorate, things are going to get worse. The addiction process is fatal. If they continue on, they're going to die.
When you come down, it hits you hard. And I attempted suicide a couple times. And otherwise I'd sit in my room, listen to depressing songs, crying all day.
Although there appears to be advancements in the area of methamphetamine treatment, there are obstacles in a rural setting.
The nearest inpatient program we have in the Morris area is 50 miles. You're talking 50 miles, you're talking trying to have families participate, you know, driving down once a week somewhere to try to assist in their spouse, their child, their whoever's treatment recovery program. Halfway house, followed by halfway house placement. Again, nothing in the area, so we're shipping a lot of our clients out and about the greater state of Minnesota because we just don't have a lot of treatment opportunities.
The providers that are within our general area, there are 2 that have a meth track in their treatment program, and then we do have outpatient here, and there is a new outpatient program in Alexandria that's opening up as well.
Treatment has become less accessible in this state, and it's harder for people to get treatment in Minnesota, even under the best of circumstances. And you can always count on meth addicts presenting for treatment under the worst of circumstances. So we have this disconnect even here in Minnesota.
A range of professionals have talked about various ways to combat methamphetamine, all of which are important in their own right. However, one central theme in this fight is espoused by all, and that is community involvement at all levels.
In my opinion, as a community, people need to open up and realize that it is in their community, whether they want it to be or not, whether they wanted to admit it or not.
It's anywhere you go. Many people think that it's not in small towns, that small towns are safe, but it's everywhere.
I think that people need to have a very healthy respect for methamphetamine and not minimize the effects that it can have on people, and not put your head in the sand.
Knowledge is power. People need to be aware and get aware of the problem and the extent of the problem. There are seminars, there are public meetings. I would encourage people to go to that and learn about it. It's not necessarily a problem that's just affecting somebody else. In one way or another, it's going to affect us all.
The usage is increasing, and it's going to take a community-wide education involvement. We've got to stop the new people from using it, and to do that, the word's going to have to get out that this isn't like other drugs. It has a more devastating effect.
Well, I would probably say that methamphetamine has been the one drug that has just about torn us all apart. But it also, in the same respect, is the same drug that is pulling us all together.
People need to be proactive in their families, in their communities, and I think they have to be politically proactive to empower the organizations that we trust to help take care of our community.
We already have the churches on board. They are very much aware of what's going on, and so they're helping. That's very, very helpful. I think the service organizations are becoming much more aware too. I know that presentations are made to the Lions and the Kiwanians and other people that are concerned.
And our dream really is that every county in the state would have a citizen-based group working on methamphetamine that would have representatives from all different sectors of the community, probably led by local government officials, but we'd like to see business people and educators, parents and family of meth users, clergy, all realms of the community coming together, talking about their vision for how to address the problem, developing a plan and carrying it out. And often that kind of work does not take a lot of money because so much of the resources already are in the communities like Morris and others. People that care, people that have passion, they just need to get organized a little bit, come together, and they can really make incredible things happen.
We owe it to our children to have prevention. The problem is we always look at after the fact. We need to look at today. We need to stop our kindergartners from thinking about it, and our first graders and our fourth graders and our eighth graders, so when they get a little bit older, they know that that's just not something that's okay to use. And that comes from educating the youth and educating the parents, and that's where the answers lie. The answers will never lie in after the fact, ever.
Morris Area High School started a drug task force, an awareness group, a couple of years ago, and we met monthly. When meth became an issue, we honed in on that. We did some of our own education as a committee. We asked other groups to come in and inform the staff, including the Morris Area Police Department. And we have disseminated information to parents.
We perform education on a monthly basis. And I would say at least once a semester, one of those programs is going to be dealing directly with substance abuse. And the ones that we predominantly hit will be alcohol, marijuana, crack, and methamphetamines. If I were talking to a college student, basically what I would say to them, and I probably wouldn't say this about all drugs, but with methamphetamine I would say you need to make a choice. Are you going to use methamphetamine or are you going to go to college? Because they are mutually exclusive. You cannot do both. People who are addicted to methamphetamines are not capable of surviving in a college atmosphere.
When I realized I didn't want to use anymore was when I saw my baby's ultrasound, when I heard his heartbeat for the first time, and I decided that I couldn't do it anymore.
And if you know somebody that you think, is using, get help right away. The longer you wait, the harder it is.
Please do not take the small things for granted. Time waits for no one. Call your parents often. Tell them that you love them. When you hug them and they hold on a little bit longer than you'd like, hug them back just as hard.
Absolutely, it can happen to anyone. But the last thing that I would like to leave you with is that as long as somebody has breath, there's hope. And there are people who have had repeated treatments, and while it can be a drain of a resource, if people recover, it's well worth the money. So you don't give up, even though you get frustrated, you don't give up.
In our conversation about meth, we've learned many things. We've learned our community, like many others in rural Minnesota, has been and continues to be affected by the methamphetamine problem. But we've also learned that there is hope. There is hope with new treatment, and there is hope with new legislation. And most importantly, there is hope with community. Because when all is said and done, the fact remains, it will take an entire community to solve the meth problem.